Welcome to yet another episode of Connecting the Dots with me, your host, Juliet. This is a podcast where African science meets society. We're especially excited because for the very first time on the show, we are graced by a social scientist, Professor Abdoulaye Gueye. And in today's episode, we go beyond the lab and into the lecture halls, many of which are underfunded and under-resourced. African universities, still grappling with deep colonial legacies, face urgent questions about who they serve, what knowledge they produce, as well as whose image they operate, especially in the context of significant political and economic shifts here at home and abroad. Today, as I've said, I am joined by Professor Abdoulaye Gueye, a Senegalese. So we're very excited to be having him on the show today. He is a professor of sociology at the University of Ottawa, not Ottawa, Ottawa, Canada. His research covers mainly the collaboration of the African academic diaspora with African-based academics, the making of Black identity in contemporary France, and the memory of slavery. He has held numerous residential fellowships at Harvard University, Stellenbosch in South Africa, as well as the Carnegie African Diaspora Program. He's gotten that twice, and the French-based Institution of Advanced Studies. Welcome to the podcast, Professor Lai.
Thank you very much, Juliet, for having me. It is a real pleasure to be here in Nairobi with you and to discover this wonderful place with wonderful people. So as you say, yes, I'm a sociology professor. I have been teaching at the University of Ottawa for several years now. And academic collaboration between African academics and Africans in the diaspora is one of the main topics of my research.
And before we get deeply into that research focus of the Black identity, when you look back, what memories or moments or experiences shaped your path into the social sciences?
Whenever a friend of mine asks me a question, I remember back during my first or second year, how did you make the choice to become a sociologist? And there is a story behind. One day I was at home. My brother, who was much older than me, came home with an assignment. And an assignment was about the functions of bicycle in southern Senegal, a place called Casamance.
Yeah.
And, like what brothers do, he just threw the assignment on the table and left. And as a curious kid, I took the assignment, I read through it, and I discovered something I never suspected, that for me, bicycle was just an object, like a means of transportation. You get on it and then you move.
Yeah.
And then what my brother found out is that actually bicycle has several functions. One of the functions, the bicycle was used as a dowry. When you were marrying a woman in the southern part of Senegal, the family would require you to give them a bicycle.
Oh.
Yeah, bicycle used as a way to carry yourself from a place to another one. But also bicycle used as a means to carry animals, like, you put your chickens, your whatever, etc. And I asked my brother, what is this? In which class did you write this assignment? He said, because my brother wasn't interested in sociology. This is in my sociology class. It was like very dismissive. And I look at him, I say, I think this is what I want to do when I go to university. He said, oh, really, sociology? And then he moved on.
Yeah.
And, this is the thought of a young kid who does not really think through about, things through. But then I kept this idea that I wanted to be a sociologist. And when I arrived, when the time to choose the different disciplines, because in the French system, they give you a form, ask you to name 3 universities and 3 disciplines.
Right. Yeah.
So I say, okay, university number 1, Sorbonne, Paris 1. University number 2, Sorbonne, Paris 1. University number 3, Sorbonne, Paris 1. And as of discipline, sociology. And that was the beginning of the dream.
And did you make it?
And I make it because today I'm a university professor and I teach sociology.
That's impressive. How old were you?
I think that when I had this conversation with my brother, I think I was around 14 years old.
14 is quite young, and for the fact that you were very clear from a young age what you wanted to study, I think is also a good one to see where you've ended up today. Tell us, for people who might not quite understand, what is the difference in the sciences between sociology, social sciences and humanities versus maybe the physical sciences? What is the difference?
Well, I mean, people are more familiar with what we call experimental science because they know that, like in biology, you can go to the field, you cut a piece of this flower or this tree, you go to the lab, you study the different component, and so on and so. So you have a factor-based, process that is taking place. When you are in the social science, it's much harder because human beings, first of all, you have some ethical guidelines. You cannot play with human beings the way you want.
Yeah.
So what do you have? Your resources is you go to the field. When we say the field, it's any kind of a space. It could be this space, for instance. You get there, you observe what is happening there. And once you observe, you start asking questions. As a sociologist, asking questions is extremely important because we want to know things from the perspective of the person who is living them. Because you cannot just come and impose your own view of what people are doing, what people are saying, and say that, okay, this is how you must think about this reality. You need to know what people themselves, the meaning they give to what they are doing or what they are saying. And but of course, sociology, like every discipline, has several schools. What I just mentioned is the school that, one of the major founder of this school, if not the founder of this school, is called Max Weber. He's a German sociologist. And he said that, okay, you have to understand things from the eyes of those who are living them and those who are doing them. But you have another kind of sociology that wanted to be like science, hard science. They call it very objective approach. That is, you put your feelings, your subjectivity aside, and you treat human beings, you treat society as if it was something like an object. So an object that cannot move, that cannot, do anything. And then afterwards, you draw a conclusion by saying that, oh, this is what you have to understand from this situation. I am not a big fan of this type of sociology. I'm rather a fan of the former school that I mentioned because I wanted to know through the eyes and the speech of the people how they understand their own living, their own life. Because if you don't pay attention to what the people are saying themselves about their own life, you miss a lot.
Right.
Let's say that you want to bring solution. How can you bring a relevant solution to a problem if you don't listen to what the person feels and what the person does? Even doctors nowadays, when you sit in their room, they start asking questions. What do you feel? Where is your pain, etc., etc., and how did that happen, etc. And then, as a result of all this conversation, they start saying, okay, maybe this could be the solution. So I think that sociology this type of sociology I'm talking about, the interpretative sociology, has done a lot to help us, live together, bring people together, and also understand in a more accurate way the world in which we live in.
Right. I mean, I am taking a bias here, and I feel like children might be the best sociologists because they take time to assess their environments. Would you say that's a bit accurate?
In a certain way, children are good observers. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And especially in countries where you tell children not to interject in a conversation. So all they have to do is just to sit and observe and take in. And then if you give them the opportunity to open up, now you have children start asking you questions. Why do you think this? Why do we do this way, etc.? And then the adult will give answers, etc. And then the children would come up with an explanation of why things happen the way they happen. So yeah, in a certain way, because every science, especially social science, you have to come with some humility. When you go to a place, you have to really arrive there with some humility, curiosity, and the disposition to listen.
Right.
Because listening is extremely important. You cannot just come from your endowed chair or whatever you call it and say, I know everything, just act and I will tell you what is the meaning of your action. Yeah.
So your biography, going back to your choices of sociology from 14 years old, we have seen that your biography paints a very vibrant shift from different continents.
Right.
Can you just walk us a little bit from how you left Senegal heading over to up north to France and then across the Atlantic?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, like I guess many African youth, I was a restless kid.
Yeah.
I have always wanted to travel, to walk around. I remember as a kid, there's something that we used to do. I would I would sit on a chair, and if there was a tree of any object in front of me, I would raise my foot and put it on. And my grandma say, "Put your foot down," and I would say, "Why do you ask me?" Because you're gonna be far away from us.
Oh,
Because she was connecting this fact. I mean, this
interesting.
kind of a mythology or
Yeah.
superstition that because your foot is too high, meaning that you have to stride and go long, places.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just, I never paid attention to this until, later on. I say, well, to a certain extent, maybe she was right. There was something she was feeling I didn't
She's a
feel. She
visionary.
knew that I would be too far from her if I continue acting this way. So I left Senegal. I went to Paris. I was in Paris with my brother for most of the time. And, after, at some point, I thought I was going to stay in Paris when I was doing my PhD, and I got my PhD. And as a sociologist, I was telling myself that, I want to get a job here. But the French system is very different. I mean, back then, first of all, there were not many jobs available in sociology.
Yeah.
Second of all, as you know, the world we live in, race matters.
Yes.
If you don't have the right color in certain countries, the opportunity that you will get would, shrink. So what I did was that as soon as I completed my PhD, I was told, of course, that, if you have an international exposure, that's what we say in social science, you have more chances to get a job. International exposure meaning that the place where you have written your PhD, you should leave it and go to a different place, and preferably in a foreign country.
Right.
So there was this. The first opportunity came up from a structure called Agence de la Francophonie Internationale, which means International Francophonie Organization. They were giving what they call postdoctoral excellence fellowships. So I applied. I did not really think about it after the application. I just applied and said, okay, I want to go to a new place. And 6 months later, I got a letter informing me that I got the scholarship. What was good with the scholarship is that they would ask you to choose the country where we wanted to go, as long as the country is a francophone country.
Yeah.
French speaking.
Yeah.
So because I was
Why
living
French speaking?
Because the Agence de la Francophonie is an organization. It's an international organization that is bringing together all francophone countries, and they wanted they wanted to encourage the mobility of francophone scholar within the francophone world. So I decided when I applied that if I got the fellowship, I would go to Canada. But as you know, Canada is is a bilingual country.
Right.
One part of Canada is Anglophone, the other part is Francophone. But because there is a Francophone part, I say, okay, well, the Agence de la Francophonie would allow me to go to Canada because part of Canada is Francophone, which is Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I choose Quebec is very simple. I could have chosen Belgium because Belgium is, next door compared to Paris, or Switzerland, because also Switzerland is partly Francophone. But I didn't choose Belgium or Switzerland. I chose Canada because my brother back then moved already to the US in New York. And I wanted to be closer to my brother.
Yeah.
So I say, I'm going to choose Quebec. And if I got it, I am by airplane, I am 1 hour from New York. And by bus, I am 8 hours from New York.
Yeah.
So when the result came in and I learned that I was granted the scholarship, I was really overjoyed because I said, okay, now I can see my brother 4 times a year if I want, those kind of stuff. And I arrived in Canada with the idea that I would spend only a year in Canada and go back to Paris and look for a job in academia. But when I arrived, there was another opportunity, another scholarship. And I say, people around me already encouraged me to apply for it. And I apply and I got it. And I say, okay, now I'm going to spend 2 years in Canada. I love it to be next to my brother, but still, I wanted to go back to Paris as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, because when you leave people behind, I mean, your supervisors, and so I was still conversing with them. Okay, how is the job market? And they tell me, the job market is awful right now. If I were you, if I found any opportunity, I would take it.
Yeah.
So the people that I met in Canada, in Quebec, were telling me, okay, you have a very interesting profile, academic profile, meaning, why don't you apply for a job here? I say, but I cannot because I'm not Canadian. I don't have, on paper they say that you have to be permanent resident or a national, but in reality, if your dossier is stronger than the Canadian or the resident permanent dossier, they will hire you. I say, oh, really? So I applied. And then I got one offer from a U.S. university, and I got also this offer from the University of Ottawa. And I decided to take the offer from the University of Ottawa for what? For one specific reason, actually, because the University of Ottawa is is a bilingual university. It's predominantly Anglophone, but we have about 20% of our students' body who are Francophone. So we teach in French and in English.
Interesting.
And back then my English was awful.
Yeah.
So I said, this is a challenge I could take because it allows me to be in an Anglophone world environment and I would learn English and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go to the University of Ottawa. So end of the story.
Wow. And how many languages do you speak now?
I speak 3. I speak French is my first. I consider French my first language because this is the language in which I'm more comfortable.
Yeah.
I can dream in it and stuff. English and also Wolof, which is my mother tongue.
Yeah, which is what you speak.
And I don't write in Wolof because I don't know how to write in Wolof. So that's why I don't say that Wolof is my first language because it's not really. It's just like, lingua franca for me. I can have a conversation with people, but I wouldn't be able to even, write a letter.
Write a letter. I was about to say that. I wonder, I don't know if your grandmother was a reading type, but I was going to say back then it would have been interesting if you were able to write to her. But this is going to bring us back to a conversation about decolonialization or colonialization and the impact of education on the continent. But before we go there, I want to touch a little bit about, even though you did live Paris, France, you still maintain some ties there. And your current research focuses on the definition of the Black identity in France. We've heard you from your different interviews or even your presentations. Okay. You have joked that your grandmother has said, you are her white grandson. So when did you become white? And what can be said about racial identities in France and on the continent as well?
That's a quite interesting question. Actually, first of all, to your point, of course, I don't live permanently in Paris anymore. But I could say that actually this is the place where I spend most of the time when I'm not in Ottawa. I go to Paris 4 or 5 times a year, either for professional reasons or for, just meeting members of my family, because I still have members of my family living in Paris. So I'm very much connected to Paris, and Paris in particular and France in general. Now, my grandmother's, before I get to my grandmother, of course, the research I'm conducting and which I just completed about Blackness in France is one of the research topic I would say that is the closest to me. In a sense that, first of all, as we say, there is a French historian who used to say that every scientific endeavor is autobiographical, meaning that whenever you are doing research, if you look carefully, if you dig deep, you will find out that this research is connected to your own experience.
Yeah.
Even when you say, I'm a biologist, like vegetal biology, I'm looking at plants. If you dig deep, you might find out that the plant you are more interested in maybe is the one that is suffering in your village or your grandma's village, and then you cannot take it anymore, so you have to find a solution to this problem.
Yeah.
So for me, working on Blackness in France is also a way of going back to my experience and my trajectory in France as a young Black kid. France has not changed that much in that regard. I remember going down my building, the building where I was living, to take the subway. It was about 200 meters. There was one day, and I'm not joking here, I'm really serious. There was one day I was stopped 4 times by cops between leaving my building and entering the subway station. Why? Because did I wear jeans? But most of my white friends were wearing jeans. So the only explanation is that my skin color is telling the cops that I'm not part of this society, or I could not be part of this society. So when I was in Canada and I say, okay, there has been this issue about blackness in France, I have to go back to it. And some people were even, some colleagues were telling me, but you're too far from France now. I said, that is exactly the reason why I should do this research, because now I have this distance. Because distance is extreme. That's why we talk about hindsight,
Right.
Thanks to distance, you see things in a different way.
Yeah.
So I say, I got to go back. And now I have a different status. I'm not wearing jeans anymore.
I don't think it matters when you wear jeans.
So I can try to see if that was part of the explanation. And, what was in the beginning a sort of autobiographical endeavor has become a sociological endeavor. So hence my research about blackness and what has become as a result the life experience of people of African descent in France. Because when I was living in Paris, people were not claiming a black identity. On contrary, they were trying to just blend, to hide the fact that they are black in a white society. But as years went by, as you have multiple generation living in the same place and having the same experience, then they start saying that, okay, our effort to integrate in this society has not been very helpful. So why not embrace what we are, which is our blackness? And they start creating organizations like some association to claim this black identity and go as far as to say, look, France has to come to terms with the fact that this is no longer a white society. This is a multiracial society.
Yeah, that's correct. No, and I really love the fact that you are, even though you're based in Canada, you're studying it for France. But it'll be interesting. I've spoken even on this podcast with different top scientists, and some of them, black identity, even when they travel, you go to queue at the flight you're about to board, or you're checking in at the counter, and because, maybe you're traveling business class because it's a long flight, and they walk up to the business class counter and people say, oh, no, you're in the wrong aisle. So it's interesting how some of these perceptions across the world play out. In your view, in terms of colonial legacies,
so there's something I didn't say because it's always part of the question. When my grandma was saying, oh, this is my white grandson.
Yes, oh yes, yes. When did you turn white? How stay black?
Actually, I think I would say that I turned white when I returned for the first time from Paris, and body language changed.
Yes.
There's a body language that is associated with whiteness or blackness. There's a taste that is associated with whiteness or blackness. For instance, you come to your country of origin and you start saying, okay, could we go to the museum? People will say, what the heck is going on with you? We don't go to museums.
Are there museums in Dakar? Are they
although
that popular?
Although there's a museum, but for them, the museum is the place where foreigners, the white people, are going in particular. And they see it also, through your culinary test, the kind of stuff you eat and you would like to eat, etc., etc. So my grandma just, notice, and which is quite interesting, because you as a person, when you don't see yourself, basically, you don't see you changing.
Yes.
It is the people that you have in front of you that who notice everything that has changed about you. And through the eyes of my grandmother, I realized that I was no longer the little kid, Senegalese, Wolof, whatever you call it, kid, who would embrace whatever was Wolof or whatever was Senegalese. And now there's a new layer on me, because I'm not going to say that you change differently. I would say you put a new layer, and that's what it is about. There's one identity and you put another one on it, you put another one. And depending on the situation, one identity would be prominent compared to the other one. Just like there are places where people see you just as a woman. There are places where people see you first and foremost as a mother. And there are places where people see you first and foremost as a black person.
Right.
And then, there were many instances when my grandma saw me just as a sort of a white person and not as the grandkid or as a Wolof or whatever.
That is funny. So, in your view, how have colonial legacies really shaped your current research priorities and also teaching methods in African academia?
Um, to tell the truth, actually, I have not thought about this question during my early years as a student, as an academic. It was through readings that I start asking myself, okay, um, is there something going on? And I think that there are a few authors that have been, of course, the famous Ngugi wa Thiong'o,
Yeah.
who passed away
May he rest in
recently,
peace, yeah.
because it was during my college years that I read Decolonizing the Mind. And I'm glad I didn't read it earlier, because maybe if I had read it at the age of 15, 16, I would not have really gotten, the true meaning of this
Yes.
book. But I read it later on, and I say, oh, wow, okay. Because, when you are a Senegalese, you take for granted that the medium of communication, if you have been to school, should be French.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't question that. You just, it's like naturalized. You say, this is natural. As a Senegalese, I should only speak French in, wherever I am, and people are supposed to understand. I remember even being a kid, seeing people going to any administrative office and speak Wolof to have a paper, for instance, like, you need your birth certificate, this birth certificate of your son or your daughter. You go to the, to this service and you say, okay, in Wolof, where can I get the birth certificate? And I say, why people are
Can you just say that in Wolof so we can hear?
Fan la mën a amee certificat de naissance. Certificate de naissance. Where could I get a birth certificate?
And that's Wolof.
Well, the last part is not Wolof,
Yeah.
certificate de naissance, because it's a French word, but
Okay.
they have not invented, in our African tradition, you did not need such, a birth certificate. And when I saw, for instance, the civil servant responding in Wolof, I said, this is not your job. You should be speaking French, because this is a French space.
Yeah.
And, as a kid, you think in those terms, and you realize now later on, when you read a book by Ngugi wa Thiong'o titled Decolonizing the Mind, you say, actually, I was totally wrong.
Yeah, it was the
because
opposite.
this is the country of my ancestor.
Right.
We had a language before French arrived. So why do we have to converse in this foreign language? And by the way, when you even dig deeper and you realize that actually the literacy rate is about 36%, back then. Today it has changed. You say, actually, if we taught Wolof, maybe the literacy rate would be 90-something%.
Yeah.
And currently I'm living in Addis Ababa, and that is something I love about Addis. Of course, it affects me as a person, but I say, okay, my experience is not more important than the experience of the Ethiopian, because Addis is the place where Amharic is everywhere.
Yep.
You speak Amharic, you read Amharic. If you don't read Amharic, you're lost.
Yeah.
The university is one of the rare places where I can have a conversation with people, because that's where you can find people who speak English. But I don't resent them for that, because I say this is a country where people have valued their language, and they're doing their best to preserve the language. And yes, so that is basically one of the beginning of my interest in decolonial coloniality and decoloniality. And later on, again, as I say, I was reading all the academics who made it their topic of interest, and I say, okay, well, I have to contribute to this discussion myself. Can we say that African academia is under the colonial yoke?
Mm-hmm.
And if that is true, how can we measure that? Or in other words, how can we point our fingers on the very facts that are the result of this dependency towards the colonial past? And after reading this literature, I saw that there were some flaws, some shortcomings in the literature, because most of this literature is very abstract. They come up with some strong theories, but they don't see the complexity of the issue, especially the complexity of the making of academia in particular. Because in academia, as we all know, you have those who teach, you have those who do research, but they also use different means, like language is one, you need fundings, you work with other people, etc., etc. So I was telling myself, okay, if you take academia as a whole, you might miss a point. The point being that you just focus, for instance, on one tiny aspect and say, oh, we're still on the colonial yoke. You have to look at, different aspects of academia. Language is one of them. And in my research, what I found out is that actually, because colonialism is a historical process, we know exactly when it started and when it ended. So there are countries that were colonial countries and countries that were colonized countries. But in the West, there are countries that have never colonized any other country in Africa.
Yeah.
So I told myself that maybe we could look into language to see, for instance, if a country that was formerly colonized by French has still preserved French as an official language and the language of communication within academia. But then if you have a country that was not colonized by French and whose language is very prevalent in the, this African system, would you say that this is the effect of colonization? No, it is not. So there is another aspect, which is internationalization. And internationalization is not today, not only African countries want to be internationalized. I mean, African universities, all universities are trying to internationalize. I'm pretty sure because during the off discussion, you were telling me that you were trained in Melbourne.
Yeah.
The Australians are happy to say that we have 120 nationalities in our university.
Yes, of course.
That is part. Or we have 120 nationalities within our faculty. I see universities in the United States that take pride on the fact that more than 100 nationalities are represented in their faculty. And this is, for them, they're a way to bring more students from abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So Africans also African universities are playing this game. They wanted to have more international university. If, for instance, you go to the website of the University of Ghana, you will be amazed. You will see that there are two words that are central.
Yeah.
Excellence, internationalization.
Okay.
So they want also to be part of this game. And who should blame them? Because the world we live in, unfortunately, unless we all agree to change it, but it is a world of competition. It is a world in which people are trying to say that I wanted to get the best for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and universities are doing the same. So for a university that is not internationalized is going to wither, to die, to fade away. So universities need this internationalization in order to survive. And this internationalization is very different from colonialism. You have to be very careful. If a university maintains mostly ties with the former colonial power, like let's say the University of Mali has only relationship with the universities of France and is getting funds from France, then now you can start, questioning the relationship between Mali and France and say that this is an effect of the colonial past.
Right.
But if it is Niger, for instance, that is creating solid bonds with, British universities or American universities, you cannot put that under the colonial framework because it's not part of the coloniality. This is part of internationalization.
So if I was quickly to ask you, what are the 3 problems you see with African universities? What would they be?
Well, first of all, I see that African universities are still very much dependent economically on Western universities.
Right.
And this is something that can be changed. This is something that can be changed if we take the time and make the effort to reflect deeply on what we have and what we do not have. I'm just going to take a simple example. Philanthropy, if you go to North America, philanthropy is a big thing. Philanthropy meaning that, okay, universities go out their way and try to raise money in order to build their own institution.
Right.
So they got money from different good people. I mean, good people. Not all of them are good, but different people who want, because some of them actually, some of them, they give money not to support financially the university, but to have their names on the building.
On the buildings.
That's just like egotism,
Yeah.
It has nothing to do. But my point is that philanthropy, first of all, African universities have realized the importance of philanthropy in building university very, very, very lately.
Recently, yeah.
Recently. So, and still today, when they think about philanthropy, they go to the West. They go, ask for Bill Gates Foundation, for MasterCard Foundation, etc., etc. And I say, okay, there are many billionaires in Africa. Whether we know them, we don't know them. But if you do your research, you will find them. And I remember during one of my professional gig in Dakar, I was asking colleagues at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop if they know Youssou N'Dour,
Mm-hmm.
because I was giving a workshop on how to write grants and raise money to do your research. And they say, of course, they were kind of even who the hell this guy think he is, because we are Senegalese, Youssou N'Dour. And I asked them, okay, is there any relationship that exists between their universities and Youssou N'Dour? And they say no. And I say, okay, did you know that Youssou N'Dour was handed a doctorate honoris causa by Yale University? They were surprised. They say in the US, Yale is always ranked among the top 5 universities in the world. And they didn't know about that. And I say, you see, that's the problem. Because Youssou N'Dour, when Youssou N'Dour receives an award from Yale University, he will do something for Yale University. Whether it's money out of his pocket or he would create an event that would raise money. Mm-hmm. I say, if your university decided to hand a doctorate honoris causa to university, Youssou N'Dour would do the same thing. Youssou N'Dour was, for instance, you could just ask Youssou N'Dour afterwards, could you just, organize a concert in the biggest stadium in Dakar, which is a 60,000 capacity, if everybody pays 20,000 CFA, that's tons of money. And Youssou N'Dour would just, hand you the money and say, this is my contribution to research. I don't know. I don't need the money because this is just one night, 2 hours concert. And I give them. But the people are more likely to look yonder, beyond the shores of their country or of Africa, and thinking that money is available only outside of the continent. But in the continent, there are people who are willing and who can afford. There's this Nigerian person also. He's a
Dangote.
No, not Dangote. It could be another example, Dangote. But I am the Nigerian person I have in mind is what is
Tolu? No.
Maybe the name will, but I'm going to describe him. Actually, he's a major stockholder in Heathrow Airport. Half of Heathrow not Heathrow, Gatwick Airport.
No.
Yes. Half of Gatwick Airport.
Nigerian.
Adebayo is the name.
Okay.
Adebayo, and he graduated from Harvard. Mm-hmm. He got an MBA, and he's also a lawyer by training. And this is a person who gives money to Harvard because he's of this what do his alumni do, whatever.
Of course, yeah.
But Nigerians don't care about what he's doing and don't know him. And I'm pretty sure that if a Nigerian university or one institution within a Nigerian university went to him and say, look, we have this project, it could be about anything that is relevant for him, and we just need support. Just try it first.
Yeah.
Just try it. But yeah, there's I think that this is a problem within our continent. It's one of the challenges. The second challenge I see, this is a second problem,
And before you go on the second challenge, I've been meaning to say actually first, you said you are Senegalese about Youssou N'Dour.
Yeah.
These are Senegalese. So we don't want to assume some of our listeners and our audiences know Youssou N'Dour.
Oh, okay.
But for those people who don't, he is a famous songwriter and a singer who sang 7 Seconds. I think this was back in the 90s.
Yes, it was back in with Nene Chéri.
Very popular, and also became the Minister of Tourism for Senegal. So a politician as well.
Right.
Second one on problem with African universities.
Yes. The second problem we have is that we are not very strategic with the resources that we get in terms of academia. Let me just take an example. We have too many public universities, too many programs. We do not give opportunities to some young students who might not want to go to university just to have a training after high school.
Yeah.
Like I just want a training in any profession, but I don't want to go to university and spend 4 years or 6 years, 7 years. But we are pushing them to university and giving a scholarship. Like if you take the case of Senegal, when Abdoulaye Gueye came to power, he decided to give either a full scholarship or half scholarship to every student. That's a huge burden on the national budget.
Yeah.
So you have to be more selective. If you take the case of many other countries, including France, which is the model for Senegal, France has a system that is a sort of a, dual system. You have what they call a grandes écoles, which is the top schools. It's a national competition. You have about 400,000 kids sometime who compete, and barely 4,000 of them would get in.
Oh my gosh.
But they all have a scholarship, and these are the people who become the top of the top in the country.
Yeah.
So they know how to manage the asset that they have. So Africans should think about one thing. First of all, it's reducing the number of students that are enrolled in African universities and support really those who get in. So that's one thing. One challenge. The second challenge that I've noticed, I don't know if it is true in Kenya, but in Francophone Africa, it is true. This challenge is that when you are an excellent student, the first, thought of the state is to send you abroad, not to the local university. They will send you to Sorbonne, they send you to Harvard, they will send you to Cambridge, etc. What now? You have to ask, what image does it send about African university? If you take your best and bright and send them to foreign universities, you are telling the rest of the country that my universities have no value, basically. There's no country. I mean, have you ever seen an American giving a scholarship to an American and say, go to Paris and, at Sorbonne, and then you come back in 4 years? Or have you seen a Chinese doing the same thing, or a Japanese? No. If you are a great, bright student, they give you a scholarship to stay in your country and study in your own university.
Use those financial resources internally.
Use the financial resources, and also at the same time, build a very positive image of the local university. And now there is a third challenge, which is that Africa has turned its back on a project that, in my mind, was an excellent project. This project was a federal, academic system.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1960s, in Francophone Africa, countries came together and decided that in each country we will build one center of excellence, central university.
Yeah.
If you wanted to study, veterinary science, you would go to this country, and every single country would have a quota of students.
Right.
And they would send it to this country, and they were trained for 4 years before going back to their own country. But by the late 1960s, it was kind of a competition. Every single African country wanted to have its own university, its own program, its own, etc. And the result is that instead of pulling all the resources and make a very efficient use of it,
we spread it.
We spread the resources, and then the result has become less, convincing that what we should have had.
Yeah, I mean, and this statement is leading me to my next question in light of the current geopolitical shifts. We've seen what's happening in Burkina Faso, in Mali, with Francophone Africa, which I think, quite frankly, the rest of Africa must be cheering them on.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see, academia changing, and also its links to diaspora?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see some opportunities that we can begin to fill? Should we expect the diasporan community to immigrate? Can we call it immigration?
Okay.
To come back to the continent and help strengthen our university systems and our learning and academia.
Mm. So the current situation, of course, it's at this point, the country that you mentioned, Niger, Burkina, Mali, scientifically speaking, these countries are not the heavyweights in Africa.
Okay, yeah. That's...
So that's one thing. The second thing is that, of course, it is a good thing to be autonomous. It is a good thing to be a sovereign country. I am not a big fan of military regime, because the problem with military regime is that actually you silence those who could have contributed, great ideas, because they are afraid.
Yeah.
They're scared to say whatever they want. So that's one thing. Now, the diaspora, of course, has always, well, not always, but in the past at least 20 years, the diaspora has played a quite important role in Africa, to the extent that some countries have decided to create a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora.
Yes.
You see.
I have seen that, yeah. Kenya has that, I think.
Kenya has that, Senegal has that, Ghana has that. So just to give a few examples, because they realize the importance of the diaspora. The
Absolutely.
diaspora, just in terms of remittance, for instance, if I take the diaspora in its, global meaning, the diaspora contribute billions of dollars every
Yes.
year
Yeah.
to the African economy. If the diaspora stopped, for instance, just for 1 year, contributing, you would have like a health system going down,
Collapse.
you'll
Yeah.
have a school system collapsing, etc., etc.
Infrastructure.
Not to mention infrastructure. And by the way, just a few weeks ago, the current Senegalese government, which is, as you know, composed of people who call young now because they are in their late 40s or early 50s,
Yeah.
they decided, following the example of Nigeria, to ask the diaspora to buy some shares in some companies instead of going out and borrowing money. And apparently they have reached already their goal. I don't remember how many billions
That's amazing.
of SAFA, but they already have reached their goal. So this is a good thing to know. Now you have one specific category of the diaspora that I want to talk about, which is the academic diaspora.
Right.
The academic diaspora has become an object of interest for African states in the late 1980s. Already in the, I think it was 1988, there was a program called TOCTON. It is a program for the transfer of knowledge from, the country where you live to the country where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. And it was sponsored by the UN.
Okay.
So what, it's a very simple mechanism. The idea is you as a country, you identify a sector where you need expertise. It could be a professor in mathematics or a professor in economics, etc., that your university needs. And you would tell the UN, okay, we need somebody in this specific area. And the UN would pay the salary of this person. So send him to Kenya or send him to Senegal or send her to Mali for a whole year, the duration of, sometimes it's more than a year, but the duration of the stay. And then afterwards, this person, the goal is, if the person is happy in this country and if the country can afford to keep him there or her there, then the person will stay and the country will start paying the salary of this person. But if the person does not want to stay in the country of origin, the person is allowed to go back to where they were coming from.
Yeah.
So that was introduced already in the late 1980s, but it was mostly driven by external institutions such as the UN. But something that is recent is that actually now these African countries are trying to become not only the passenger, but the drivers.
Yeah.
So they're the ones saying, okay, we don't need the UN to get involved. We wanted to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So you have embassies that are looking at the profile of, in different universities, for instance, looking at, website of universities and identify who's from this country and who's from that. And then they reach out to these people and say, look, what can you do for the university in our country? If you want to go for 3 years, you can go for 3 years. You're going to go for 3 months. We would send you for 3 months. And then you will do research or you will do teaching with our students. And then afterwards, you go back home. Because the reason why, we used to talk about brain drain, meaning that once the guy has left, he's lost to the country of origin and he's only benefiting, to the country of, residence or receiving country.
Yeah.
And we have changed our language in sociology. We start talking about brain gain, meaning that the country of origin also could gain something from this mobility if it acts very strategically. So what it means is that simply the person would go for a specific amount of time in the country of origin and work with the locals, his colleagues, who are in that country. And in that regard, you would benefit both the country of, the receiving country and the country of origin. So this is becoming a real thing. I can take multiple examples. My example included, my case included, because I'm in Ethiopia, I was in Ghana several years ago, and to contribute to, the teaching and research in the Ghanaian University. And I am in Addis Ababa nowadays to do something similar. So, and I know, hundreds of colleagues who are doing the same thing.
Okay. I mean, I want to take you to, there's an example that you have been quoted as saying, even when you look at education in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, and publications on the continent,
Right.
social sciences, there's a lot of publications on the continent. It would be interesting to see even with diaspora. And with Cote d'Ivoire, I think it contributes to that geopolitical shifts, with Francophone pushing France out, maybe also open publishing in African publications as opposed to what most scientists are used to. I don't think many people know that scientists tend to publish a lot in Northern publication.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, first of all, there are two reasons. One is because, especially when you are a scientist in a Francophone African country, the language of science is becoming, English. So the universality of English is something that nobody questions. So as a result, Francophone scientists are learning English in order to be able to publish in English. The second reason is exposure, because we're asking scholars, universities all over the world are asking scholars to have an international exposure. And because we are associating international in English, so the academic will just simply think that if he does or she does not publish in English, she will never be visible internationally.
Yeah.
And finally, we have another issue, which is funding, especially in the in experimental science. Because as a sociologist, I don't need much money to do my research. I can just, if I have a bus ticket, if I want to do research on, the dynamic of the Nairobi market, I would just
go and sit
exactly
and observe.
I would just take 20 bobs, as you call it here, go to the market.
I'm not sure you'll find any car that will allow you for 20 bobs.
Oh, now it's 40 bobs,
now,
right?
Even more. I think even 100. Things have changed. When's the last time you were in Kenya?
So, then, 100 bobs, go to the market and spend the whole day with my pad and my pencil, take notes and speak to people, etc. But if you are in experimental science, you need more money. And as a result, because the money is coming from abroad, because as I mentioned earlier, Africans are not most of the time not trying to see what is available, in the continent in terms of funding. So the money coming from abroad and mostly, international Anglophone organizations such as Carnegie, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, etc., etc. So we are witnessing this reality, which is that, English is becoming the dominant language, and also the partners are coming mostly from Western countries.
Yeah, and to your point on language, I mean, it was really, really interesting to learn very recently that English is not spoken. The highest population that speaks English is not actually based in the UK. I think you said the US was one. UK is not even top 5. There's US and Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines. Yeah. So very, very interesting. As we wrap up, if we paint a picture of the last couple of decades or centuries and look at the pre-colonial period on this continent, we had our own systems of education, of schooling, of community. And then came the colonial period that disrupted. And now we've talked about language. And then you've talked about internalizing by universities.
Right.
Independent states. Now there's our own presidents. We've gone into independence. And, Eurocentric. That's not necessarily the countries that colonize those African countries. Like US is a big player, and US never colonized any of the countries in Africa. Sorry. And then now the New World Order. Yeah. And I think you know what I'm alluding to now. Yeah. The advent of AI.
Right.
As an educator, do you see, or an academician, do you see a role of AI? Or is it something that we should be panicky about?
Well, AI in a certain way, I think that AI is playing the role that the former colonial administrators were playing during the colonial period. AI has become the tool of assimilation. Africans have been assimilated in what we call the Western model of education through AI, because the technologies is produced in the West. And the new reality, if I could say, is that actually there is a sort of a hegemon of AI, meaning that in a sense, Africans are complicit in, in their own subordination, because they are the one looking for AI.
Yeah.
It's not. It's, of course, I'm saying Africans because the focus is Africa, but we could say the same with regard to India, with regard to other, like Philippines. These are the people who go lengths, just to appropriate, to embrace AI, bring it to their own country, and without realizing that every technological object comes with a culture. There's no culturally neutral technological object. In every technological object, there's some culture. Let's take an example, a very, very stupid example. I know that, it's bad, but there was something that we used to call, the words is coming to me in French now, baladeur, is it? Walkman.
Yeah, Walkman.
You know, the famous Walkman
Yes,
in
of
the
course. 90s.
90s. So what is Walkman? Walkman is an embodiment of individualism.
Yes.
When you put it here, you don't share the music with the other people. You keep it for yourself.
Right.
It's not like the big,
radio system,
a radio system where you put in the middle of the room and it blasts it and everybody would be enjoying it. So in every technological object, again, you will have this cultural, aspect. And if you don't, you have, as a person, embracing this technology, you also have to learn how to deconstruct this technology and make it adapted to your own cultural reality. Yeah. And today, AI, if you don't pay attention, AI is going to drive us away from what Africans might consider as the most important aspect of their own culture.
Do you believe that maybe by using it and contributing to it, especially the issue about data, it offsets biasness in data? We've seen where they said the data sets that exist could be very white, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Whereas if Africans continue to contribute and give data in, then it helps by,
Exactly. I totally agree with you. The solution is not to be a spectator.
Yeah.
You Africans must be part of the process of building it, of implementing it, and sharing it.
Yeah.
Because if you are a simple spectator, of course, you would just contribute to increasing the bias. Because as we know today, even some people in health science have started questioning the use of AI to address certain health specific issues, because they say, well, this was designed to address the health issues of white people or of whatever category. But now with them, with this, mostly Black Americans in the US, participating in the design of these tools, they are making it also relevant for the African American population. So yeah, my point is that Africans, if they want to make AI their own, must refuse to be simple spectator. And what I mean by simple spectator is just consumers of AI. They must be part of, those who are building these tools.
Thank you so much, Professor Abdoulaye Gueye. As we wrap up the podcast, what is your parting short?
I tend to follow the words of this great sociologist that who has inspired me. Max Weber is his name. I named him earlier. Max Weber used to say that actually we scientists, we have to be very careful about playing the role of the prophet.
Mm-hmm.
We observe, we describe, and we analyze.
Yeah.
And we must let politicians, draw any conclusion from what we say and implement certain specific. So I will leave it there. I say that I hope that people who are listening to this podcast will make up their own mind, and those who have enough power to design policy will just, delve into it and see what would be good for either their own constituent or for Africa in general.
Professor Lai, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Your insights have been, they've been worth what we could have even paid for. And I hope also to the listeners and people who are watching that you've learned a little bit from Professor Lai, his experience. I think the point on the diaspora and the academics and also the Black identity has been insightful. So thank you so much, and best of luck with all the research work that you'll
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. That's a wrap on this episode of Connecting the Dots podcast. Remember to stay curious, stay bold, and keep listening and watching.